I wanted to start with two questions for this message. The first question is, what's the hardest part about what we are going through right now? What seems to be the hardest thing? And then the second question is, what does everybody kind of collectively seem to be missing the most right now? What's the thing that we miss the most? A lot of you have been able to connect with over the past week or two. I'm trying to call everybody and just make sure you're okay, make sure you have everything you need, make sure you have access to everything that you need, and to just remind you that I love you, that I'm thinking about you and praying for you, and I'm here if you need anything. Those of you that I have been able to get a hold of and talk with for a little while, what seems to be the number one thing that we're struggling with right now is the uncertainty of all of this. Just not knowing how things are going to end up, how things are going to be, not being able to plan. As we've been, canceling and postponing events further and further into the future, it's hitting us more and more that we just don't know how it's going to be, don't know how long it's going to be, don't know what's going to be there at the end of all of this. I think what really hit home for a lot of us was when we started to think that maybe we wouldn't be in God's house for Easter. I don't know if this is true for you, but I've never in 36 years not been at church for Easter. So the thought of us not getting together, celebrating the sacrament, and it's weird. It's a weird thought. It makes me uncomfortable, and it really hits home this idea that I don't know the next time we will be in church together. I just don't know. What I want to remind you of, which may not be a happy reminder, what I want to kind of remind you of and to make sure that we're all kind of coming to grips with, because this break from reality, whatever this is, has been an opportunity for a lot of people to sit down and think and have a lot of come to some really profound conclusions about life and what matters and what's important and what's fundamentally true. Here's something that's always been true. It's just easy for us to forget. Our plans were always tentative. Our autonomy, this idea that we can just do whatever we want whenever we want to do it, that was always an illusion. James says something that when I read it, you're going to go, oh yeah, I forgot that was in there. But James 4, verses 13 to 15, it says, look here, you who say, today or tomorrow we're going to go to a certain town and we'll stay there for a year. We're going to do business there. We're going to make a profit. How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Your life is like the morning fog. It's here for a little while and then it's gone. What you ought to say is, if the Lord wants us to, we will go, we will live, and we will do this or that. It's kind of a wake-up call. We're kind of living in that wake-up call right now. We've never been fully in control of our lives, and we've never been able to make definitive plans for the future. And a situation like this, where we don't know if we're going to be allowed to go to church for Easter, we don't know if it's going to be safe to do that, that just reminds us of how contingent we really are. The truth is, we've only ever had what God has given us, and everything has always depended on Him. I want to read you a story that'll kind of drive this home a little bit, maybe help us to think about it in a different way. Ezekiel 37, verses 1 to 14, in a section called the Valley of the Dry Bones. You probably remember this. The Lord took hold of me, and I was carried away by the Spirit of the Lord to a valley filled with bones. He led me all around among the bones that covered the valley floor. They were scattered everywhere across the ground, and they were completely dried out. They'd been there for a while. And then God asked me, hey, little guy, can these bones become living people again? And you remember what Ezekiel says. He says, how should I know? He says, look, O sovereign Lord, only you know the answer to that. Only you know the answer to that. Can this thing that's dead ever live again? Only God knows. Can what we feel like is the certainty of our lives and the lives that we've built and the security and the steadfastness and sureness of everything we've taken for granted, is that ever coming back? Only God knows the answer to that. What's the world going to be like when everybody crawls out of quarantine? Only God knows the answer to that. We've only ever had what he's given us. And there are some questions that really only he knows the answer to. In the near future for you and me, what's truly possible? We have guesses. We have ideas. We even make plans. Only God knows what's truly possible. Only he knows the best possible scenario, given all of the variables in the equation, and only he knows if that's how it's going to turn out. Everything is always dependent on him. It's always been that way. It's just moments like this that remind us of how true that is, remind us of how contingent we are. Now, here's an important question. When you think about the fact that, realistically speaking, making plans isn't a safe bet, because we don't know. Only God knows. When you think about that can seem sad or scary. Is it sad or scary that only God knows how our lives are going to turn out, and only God knows what the future holds, and only God knows what's truly possible given the current circumstances? Is that sad or scary? And what I want to tell you, the good news for today is it's not sad or scary when you hear what he has in store for us. Because we don't know what's possible for our lives. We don't know what's probable for our lives. And we certainly don't know what's certain for our lives. But we know what he's promised us. We know what he wants for our lives. And I'll remind you of what that is. John chapter 11. This is a good one. You know this story. It's Lazarus' story. But I'm wondering if maybe asking a question that Martha asks is going to make you think of something that you haven't thought of before. A man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This was the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Lazarus was sick. They send message to Jesus. He waits. Lazarus dies. And then Jesus shows up, right? When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Now, Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went out to the road to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, listen, Lord, I know that if you were here, my brother would not have died. That's an interesting thing to say. I know for a fact, God, that if you were here, you wouldn't have let this happen. I know that he wouldn't have died if you were here. So Martha's saying, I know what you would have wanted if you were here, right? You would have wanted Lazarus to live. Then she says, but even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask. So here's the thing that Martha's struggling with. She's convinced that Jesus would have rescued Lazarus from death if he was here. But now that Lazarus is dead, now she's stuck with a problem, because this bad thing happened that she's convinced God didn't want. But she also knows that God will give Jesus anything he does want. So she's trying to reconcile the fact that she knows that Jesus loves Lazarus and Lazarus is dead. And she knows that Jesus can have anything he wants. So, what our natural brain would assume is that Jesus wants Lazarus dead. Martha could have said that. She could have said, look, Lord, I know that if you were here, Lazarus would have stayed alive, but I guess it looks like this is how you want it. I guess it looks like, for some reason, in a way that you understand better than me, this is your plan, this is your will. Lazarus was supposed to die. She could have assumed that she knew what Jesus wanted based on what happened. Said, look, nothing happens without your say-so. You know, you always get whatever you want. All of these theological frameworks that somebody has made make sense on paper. Martha's right when she says, if Jesus, if you were here, he wouldn't have died. She's right when she says that. But here we are. You got here too late. Lazarus is already dead. She could have said, I guess that means this is how you want it. But she doesn't say that. She doesn't assume that she knows what Jesus wants. She says, even now I know that whatever you want, God would give you. Even now I know that if you were to ask for something wild, God would do it. This is her way of asking Jesus what he wants. She doesn't assume that the situation that's going on right now is God's will. She doesn't assume that. She just says, look, I know that you can make things however you want them to be. I know you can. And that's her way of politely saying, so do you want Lazarus dead or not? She doesn't blame him. She doesn't assume that that's what he wants. This is her way of asking, what exactly is it that you do want, Lord? Jesus responds more or less by saying, no, I don't want him dead. You know I don't want him dead. Jesus responds and says, your brother will live. Your brother will rise again. And that is a good answer to the question, what do you want? Jesus says, what I want I'm going to get. And what I want is him to be alive. He will rise again. It's not as specific as she maybe was hoping. Because she says, look, I know that on the last day, everything, everyone will rise for the judgment, right? I know he'll rise for the judgment. And then Jesus takes this as an opportunity to talk about how resurrection is bigger and different than resuscitation. Does that make sense? Resurrection is not the same thing as resuscitation. Resuscitation is life back into your body, breath back into your lungs, a beat back into your heart, waves back into your brain. You come back to life, right? That's resuscitation. Jesus says resurrection is something different than that. Listen to what he says. You know this. Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying, will go on living even if they're dead. And everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never really die, even if they're dead. Do you believe this? He says to Martha. She says, yes, Lord. I have always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. So Jesus says that there is a life, there's a way of living, there's a category of being, there's some way you can be alive where our categories of life and death don't apply to it at all. They don't accurately describe what's going on. To say that someone is alive the way Jesus means is not the same thing as saying this person has a pulse, this person has breath in their lungs. And to say that someone is dead in this way is not the same thing as they're not breathing, their heart's not beating, their brain's not showing any signs of activity on a monitor. Our categories of alive and dead can't accurately describe what Jesus is talking about with the resurrection. Biology says that you're dead when your body gives out. Jesus says that even if your body gives out, if you're in him, you keep on living in a way that biology doesn't account for. You keep on living and nothing can touch that. And Paul adds to this in the epistles that life that you have in Christ, you end up getting a new body. You get a new biology to match that at some point on the last day. We're clothed in glory. The perishable puts on the imperishable. Jesus says your body gives out, you have not died. You're not dead. And you will rise. And Paul says, and when you rise, you will be given a new biology, like to go along with this life and the spirit that you have. If that's confusing, just message me in the comments and we'll talk about it more. It's hard when I can't see your face to know if you're nodding or not. But here's what I want to get at with this, right? Because the question is, what's truly possible right now? What does God want right now? What is Jesus after? And if we know what Jesus has in store for us, if we know what he wants for us, then it's not sad or scary for us to recognize and fully admit that we don't know what the future holds, that we can't know what the future holds, that our plans might not come true. That's not sad or scary if we know what God has in store for us. And this John 11 story tells us exactly what Jesus wants. What does he want? He wants everyone to know him, to know that in him is life, to be in him so that we can live with him forever. What Jesus wants is not death. What Jesus wants is not even temporary death to prove a point. What Jesus wants is that we would know him, that we would know that in him is life, and that we would be in him and live with him forever. That's what he wants. He wants us. And he's done all that's necessary for him to have us, and he promises he's never going to let us go. Never going to let us go. And this, if you'll be with me, this brings me to that second question, right? The first question is, what are we having the hardest time with right now? And it's just the uncertainty. We don't know when this is going to be over, and we don't know what life has in store for us when it's over. We've never known. But it's not sad or scary that we can't know, because what we can know is what Jesus wants for us. And like Martha, I know that God will give you whatever you ask Jesus. So if we know what Jesus wants, we don't have to be afraid of the future. But here's that second question. What does everybody, at least the people that I'm talking to and the people that are talking on the internet, what does everybody seem to be missing the most right now? They're missing each other. Weirdly, people are missing being around other people. They're missing community. They're missing connection. We want to gather together. And as Christians, we want to be able to gather together in his name. We want to gather together and receive the sacrament. We want to know that we can be in the same place at Easter. What we miss the most is each other. What we want most is what Jesus wants most. Us. We want for each other what he prays for us in John 17. If you don't know John 17 by heart, don't feel bad. Not a lot of people do. But go read it. It's Jesus's prayer. When we say the Lord's Prayer, we mean the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. John 17 is actually the Lord's Prayer, the one that he prayed before he went to the cross. Read it. And see if more than ever you want what he wants. What are we supposed to do? Especially given the fact that we can't seem to be able to do anything. Here's the thing. If we're willing to acknowledge that today is a gift, that all of life is grace, that everything we have, he's given to us, and we don't know what's coming in the future. If we can acknowledge that today is a gift, and we can recognize that people are what matter most to us, now and always. That's what we miss most. That's what we're most looking forward to. People are what matter most to us. Today is a gift. People matter most. Then what we can do is, to the best of our ability and our limited circumstances, we can turn over every day. Say, God, here's another day. I woke up with breath. That's a gift from you. We can turn it over to him and say, how can we serve you by loving and connecting with the people that we miss? Now, some stuff we're not going to be able to do. I'm not going to be able to knock on your door and give you a hug. I mean, technically, I'm legally allowed to in Arizona. Some places you're not allowed to do that. But I'm not going to do that because I want to keep you safe and I want to respect the government that's in place over us. Romans 13, fourth commandment. So there's some stuff I can't do. I don't know what we're going to do for Easter. I don't know. But I'm not going to stop calling you on the phone. I'm going to, we're going to get creative and we're going to figure out ways to be there for each other, to make sure that we each know that we matter. We're going to try to stay connected. We're going to try to stay in community. We're going to try to make sure no one falls through the cracks and that no one is left behind or forgotten about. We're going to try to make sure everybody has everything they need and that they always have access to everything they need. We're going to try to keep being the church even though we can't be together. We're going to try. And every day, as the days go on and we miss each other more and more, and we recognize and realize more and more that some of the stuff that we thought mattered a month ago. Think about some of your conversations a month ago. I think about some of mine and I think, wow, that did not matter. Given the current circumstances, I can't believe I was that concerned about that thing. Because now, I just want to see people. I just want to be in the same room and make sure everybody is okay, and I want to give you a hug. And all the other stuff, that we might have been talking about, some of it just doesn't fundamentally matter. So I want to encourage you, since you know what Jesus has in store for you, you don't have to be afraid and you don't have to be sad and you don't have to be scared about the future, even though you can't know what's coming. It's going to be okay because you know what he wants. What he wants is you alive with him forever. And you know that God's going to give him anything he wants. So you can face the uncertain future with courage and boldness. You can face it unafraid. Say, I know that no matter what, I'm going to be with the Lord. But here I am today. And now that I recognize what matters most to me, what's deeply important to me, how can I make today about that? How can I make today about the people in my life that I want to make sure they know they matter, they know that they're connected, they know that they're loved? If you have any great ideas about that, call me. Tell me, like, hey, we could do something like this. I want to say, I don't know what we're going to do with it yet, but I'm working on it. I've got that big box of Easter eggs that Karen bought for us to give away to the kids for the Easter egg hunt. And I don't think we're going to have an Easter egg hunt on campus. So we're getting creative around here at my house, trying to figure out how do we use those to bless people in the current circumstances. So if you've got any cool ideas about like what can we do to be there for Phoenix, to be there for each other, to be there for the congregation, pass those ideas around. Let them grow into something cool and let's see what we can do with it. Reach out to me and let me know. It's great to hear your voice. It's great to see pictures of you. FaceTime me if you want to see the babies, if you miss them. Sorry, I waited to record this until after they were already asleep. So this is the second sermon in 3 years where no child is screaming while I'm talking. So I hope you enjoyed that. I miss you. I love you. And I pray that God would bless you and keep you, make his face shine on you and be gracious to you, look upon you with his favor and give you his peace. Go in that peace and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.